Well, good. Let's go.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Rome session today here. I've got Kahlil Corazo, better known as Rome Fu, very popular figure in the Rome community, and happy to have him with us. For the uninitiated here, a very quick intro. Kahlil has been a project management professional since 2007. He learned the craft at Procter & Gamble and Hewlett-Packard, where he led international teams in deploying business software. He later used the same project management tools in building his first business, which is an outsourcing partner for marketing technology services. During the pandemic, Kahlil led Project Accessible Genomics, the first volunteer effort to bring genomic SARS-CoV-2 variant identification in the lab to the developing world. So very cool. Kahlil recently released his very first book, and we're here to talk about that today, Professional Project Management with Rome. Kahlil, welcome to the session. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Happy to have you here. I thought that a good place to start would be just to talk a little bit about, you've obviously got quite a pedigree there and background as a project manager. Presumably you've used a whole bunch of different project management tools in your day. And I thought a good place to start would be just give us kind of a high level. What is it about Rome Research that you feel like makes it kind of a special or unique project management tool?
Yeah, I think you could go back to last year when I was just beginning with Room. And, it wasn't initially my tool for project management, nor did I think that it could be a project management tool. But during the time, I was already thinking, it's like, what could I do to face this pandemic? And I was journaling, I was using it for, meditation. And just one day, I realized, like, why don't I test out using Roam for project management? And one of the first things that I noticed was that, and I've heard of this in the Twitter sphere, the Roam Twitter sphere, that Roam sort of trains your mind to be also networked. And during the time when I was locked down during the pandemic, so that sort of manifested itself because in the past, my business, my academic interests, particularly in genomics, and my personal life, they were all in different parts of my mind, and they were expressed separately in different apps, in Google Docs and in Google Keep, and I was using OneNote as well, and Evernote for my academic work. But when they were all in Rome, so they allowed me to have also a solution, a network solution. So the solution to my being trapped in that pandemic was that it's like a confluence of the different parts of my life, like my academic interest in genomics and my my work as a project manager. And then even this previously I thought, like, I have my disadvantage in this game of science-based business because I'm in the peripheries of science. I'm not in, like, in Boston or Silicon Valley, but it just became clear that, hey, maybe this is an advantage. So the solution presented itself that I could bring SARS-CoV-2 genomic surveillance to locations where that is not being done. And I'm in a unique position to do that precisely because I'm here, I'm a project manager, and I've been obsessed with nanopore sequencing. So that's the first thing I noticed about using Rome as a project manager is, like, everything is connected. It's like, and then the solutions you see is no longer limited by the silos you create in your mind. It's like all this internet. This is the first one. The second one was something I realized later on, that project management is also built with atomic blocks. Like, each, essentially, a project is just blocks of work. And the work of the project manager is to orchestrate those blocks of work. And that those blocks of work is expressed in the work breakdown structure. And Rome, I think, is the best tool I've seen so far for creating a work breakdown structure. In the past, I used to use a mind map, you know, so that's like two-dimensional. But with Rome, it's not, you have multiple dimensions because you have, within each endpoint of the mind map, you could go inside it, maybe as a block reference or a page reference. So, it's those are the two main things which I noticed. Like Rome as a project management tool helps you think in a networked way. So you are open to projects which are in the intersections of your interests. And second, it allows you to run projects as orchestrations of blocks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that concept from your book, actually, this idea of sort of atomic project management and sort of conceptualizing projects that you're working on as these sort of atomic units of work. And you talk a lot about the work breakdown structure. As a fellow project manager, a lot of those concepts really resonated with me. Dive into that a little bit for our audience today. Talk a little bit about what a work breakdown structure is, and get a little bit more specific about what you think Rome does so well when it comes to creating them.
So a work breakdown structure is essentially a glorified to-do list. It is a structured and categorized to-do list. So, and maybe it's best if we just show an example.
Yeah, please.
So let me share my screen. So this is the our book. So, and then the first of the chapter and tools is about the work-based structure, and we have an example here. This is like a very old work breakdown structure. So I keep all my work breakdown structures so that it's like a favor I do to my future selves. So I've done the work of thinking about this project. I could just reuse that work in the future. For instance, if I'm ever gonna organize a conference for a visiting professor, then I just take out this old work breakdown structure, and you can see here that this is just like all the things that you need to accomplish in the project for it to become a reality. And the mind map essentially is the same structure as Rome. It's like you have a parent block, and then you have children blocks. So that's basically it. So this is what a work-based structure is. Here's another example. So this one is a work-based structure I use for collaborating with student organizations. So once I discovered project management, I was thinking, yeah, if only I knew this when I was a student, I could have saved so much time and prevented so much stress. So I've been working with student governments, like, hey, I'm going to train you in project management. This is going to be my educational outreach. So with this work-based structure, I just give this to them. So here's lesson one. This is a work-based structure. You own the yellow blocks, and I own the gray ones. So it's clear who's going to do what, and they know. Okay, this is what is going to take to bring this training to our school. So that is the work-based structure. Maybe a key thing here is the creation of the work-based structure, because as a project manager, especially if you're handling large technical projects, you cannot be the expert in all aspects of the project. So you make use of the creation of the work breakdown structure to extract those blocks of knowledge and expertise from your teammates. So let's collaboratively create a glorified to-do list of this project, and let's do it together. And back in the day, I used to do this in a conference room, and I prepare manila paper and then post-its, and then people just add like, okay, what do we need to do to make this a reality? So now, with Zoom, I just bring out my Rome graph and then start typing, and then I do one-on-ones with each one, and then we just add to that drawing what you call this list in Rome. So in Rome, it sort of looks like it's just like this. I could show you a what you call this an example here. I have if you if you use the if you use the EDN for installing the R book, you would have
Yep.
several examples of work-based structures there. Some of them were like, for instance, this one. So this is essentially it. And the highest level ones here, and then in each indentation of a block, you find here more detailed tasks. And also in this one, I include my notes. Yeah, that's basically how it looks like.
Yeah.
That's a work-based structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your comment a minute ago about wish they would have taught us this in school. It's like project management is one of those skills that I sort of self-taught and picked up over the years. And I agree with you. It makes a huge difference. And the ability to kind of bring people together and really conceptualize a project and say, what is it about this big sort of fuzzy understanding of a thing that we want to accomplish? What are the actual concrete things and again, sort of atomic blocks that are going to be required to make that happen. So I see what you're doing here is really just leveraging Rome as a great, it's a fantastic outliner tool. I know in the book you also mentioned that once you have this work breakdown structure put together in the form of an outline, you're also able to do some things like use block references, for example, when you start to parse those items from your work breakdown structure into to-do lists and sort of picking to-dos. Talk a little bit about that. Like once you've built out a work breakdown structure in Rome, what comes next?
So maybe before that, we could go to the creation, because for instance, this one, this work breakdown structure, like this is built based on interviews from people who have done crowdfunding before. So this is a crowdfunding project. I don't have an experience in crowdfunding, so I did some research on this. So this is based on my notes. So for instance, if we go to if we click on this is okay for this one. It's like this task of getting stats on similar projects is based on my notes back in November 4th, 2020. So, and I just like bring the what you call this blocks here to build this workbench structure. And for this one, this is based on a meeting I did with Inike and Ilana. Ilana is someone who has done this in the past. So that's the creation. So you're just bringing the blocks from those interview notes, from your notes from you're reading some article or reading a blog post. So you know exactly where you got your blocks in your work breakdown structure. So now that you have a work breakdown structure, you have to go now to task management. So if you are working solo, that means you're the one who will have to execute all the branches of your work breakdown structure for it to become reality. And if you're working with a team, so you would be assigning each of these work packages to your teammates. So if we start with task management, so this is simply a matter of bringing your work breakdown structure into your daily page or whatever your task management system is. So this is going to be a to-do list. So I prefer to what you call this? I prefer to create a separate to-do list over versus my workbench structure. So I want to manually move tasks from the workplace structure into my week, into my day. So I select, what will my week look like? I have several projects. Which work which work packages will I work on in this work cycle? So, and then also another thing I realized with Rome is that the work packages have different levels of importance. So in the past, it was just like they will all look equal. So in a what you call this mind map, they're like all say like they're all the same. But in Rome, it's easy to tag each one with the level of importance. For instance, like I started using the tag 80/20. So because I have so many projects and I have limited time, I want to do the work packages in each project that has the biggest impact on its being brought to reality. So that's another thing which helps me choose which aspects of the WBS I'm going to work on. So we could talk about that during if we talk about the Stallion Rider productivity model. I could show you
Yeah.
how I
Yeah.
bring it
I
in.
do want to get into that. And I think it's such a critical concept. So for anybody watching this who's not just here to learn Rome and specifically like how to use Rome for project management, but there are so many great just project management principles in your book that transcend Rome. Like they're bigger than Rome, right? They're just really good principles to internalize. It was one of my favorite parts of the book. And I think this idea of 80/20, I have a similar concept or mental model that I use just that I call just leverage, just simply leverage. I'm always looking for leverage. What are the things that I can do that require the least amount of effort and produce the maximum result? So it's a very similar concept. And I'd love to get into that and talk a little bit about your sort of productivity model, the Stallion Rider model that you lay out in the book. But kind of walk us through, maybe if you can walk us through like a specific example. Like you've got this work breakdown structure, you've got the daily notes there open on the left. What would your workflow actually look like for pulling some of those tasks in and deciding which ones to work on?
Okay, so that the productivity model that I presented in the book has 5 steps. First is like you select your projects. It's like how will you want to use your time? And essentially, it's like what are your what future do you want to happen? And you get to the future through projects. So you select projects. The second is to manage your projects. For instance, the most basic way of managing a project is to break down its work. So you create a work breakdown structure. So third is to you create your menu of work. So for me to do that, so I first create a list of projects. So that is in a template. So let me see if I have a list here. Projects here. This is the template I use to list down my project. So this is an example graph. So my main graph has a lot of personal things and also clients. Um, so it's like project 1, project 2, project 3 here, for instance. And okay, for this work cycle, and a work cycle for me is like maybe lasts a few weeks. It is when I create a new work menu. So I look at on the side, I look at my projects here. And for each project, I bring in, okay, what are the most important tasks I need to do during this work cycle? And for instance, if it's to say, create a content calendar. So I'll drag this here. So it's there, and then I'll make this a to do. That's it. So I just keep on doing that. So that's going to be my menu for the work cycle. Let me just put more things there so it looks good. So let's see, so made that, and so it's up to you at what level you want to create a to do, whether it's like on the lower level or the more detailed level. Something like that, or or it's yeah. So this one, I now pin this to my right sidebar. Um, so it's gonna stay there. I'm gonna pin that, until the next time I create a menu. So during the day, I have two parent blocks in my daily notes pages. One is the interstitial journal, and then the to do today. So this would have been here. So the creation of the work menu would have been here as part of the interstitial journal. So, and then here, now this is here. So at the start of the day, I, like for instance, I'm going to work on my content calendar. So, so I fill out my list for the day. So again, this is again a menu, meaning I'm not like say this has to be done. It's like, okay, at the moment of work, I have selected I have selected tasks which
Yeah.
I know that like will bring me towards the most important things. And then
Yep.
it's just
And
gonna be
and
like
actually,
yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but this was a concept that I really loved from the book as well, and I'd love to have you just elaborate on that thought there, just that you said in passing a moment ago, which is this idea of a work menu not really being like a highly prescriptive to-do list, right? You're not sitting down and saying, okay, on Tuesday, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And on Wednesday, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Rather, what you're doing is sort of making this menu. And then at the time that you're actually sitting down, on the day that you're sitting down to do the work, you are making decisions based on sort of what's appealing to you at that moment. Talk a little bit about that model and why you like this idea of a work menu and of selecting the work that you're going to do more closely to the time that you're going to do it instead of trying to plan, days or weeks ahead.
Yeah, so I think we've been used to like this model of the taskmaster and the doer, because it's been like that for most of humanity's history. Like, you have someone who knows how to manage, maybe during the industrial era, like say the owner of the business, and you hire laborers and you tell them what to do. And maybe we've gotten so used to that's our default way of thinking about our own work. But in the modern context, where you are, like for instance, I learned this with managing, a team. So when you manage a team, and they are educated and they are free, you could have just become a taskmaster. You have to give them autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That is your job as a manager, to give them that. So what they do, like you respect their time, you respect their knowledge, you respect their expertise. You tell them, "Oh, this is the high level thing we're gonna do. Let's do this." So if we're managing ourselves, we couldn't be taskmasters as well. We have to give ourselves autonomy. So the role of the manager is to create the environment for the maker to do his or her work. So how do we do that? So the manager simply says, okay, these are the tasks which are aligned to our long-term goals. So I have laid it out for you, and you just pick, because most of the time it doesn't really matter if you pick task A or task B at this moment. So, but if we pick a task that is meaningful, and we know it's meaningful because we have selected these tasks based on the projects we find to be meaningful. So if the only thing now is like, what's exciting right now? What's exciting? So if we pick that, so we will be much more, our energies will be focused on getting this work done, rather than like forcing ourselves to do something we don't feel like doing. So that's the main idea behind this work menu. That
Yeah.
let's yeah options.
Right. I have a very similar model that I use in my Rome graph. That's just kind of a weekly list. I just call it my weekly priorities list. And on Monday morning, I sort of sit down and say, okay, what are the most important things? And I nest those under projects, very similar to how you're doing, and say, what are the top few most important things for each one of these projects that I need to get done this week, but I'm not going to the level of saying again, okay, I'm going to do these on Tuesday morning and these on Wednesday afternoon and these on Thursday, because I just find that if I try to plan that out, invariably something comes up, priorities shift, things change, or maybe I'm not in the mood, or I don't, there's all sorts of reasons why that plan will sort of fall apart. And then all that time that you spent planning is wasted. Right. So I like this, a very sort of lean approach to saying, okay, here are the things I know that I need to get done. I'm going to put those on a list. That makes a lot of sense, but I'm going to stay dynamic throughout the week. And I'm going to sort of pick from these menus as my mood and sort of work availability and mental headspace allow me to do that.
Yep, exactly. And it's like discipline is costly. You have a limited amount of discipline, and sometimes you have to use it. There are times when you're like, okay, today, it's like you have to do these things, complete these things, one after the other. There's no choice. Let's do this. But that is, you are spending energy to move yourselves towards maybe places where you're not really keen of going. So that's yeah, giving yourself
Yeah, it's a great
options is
point.
the better
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Great point. So let's continue walking through this. So you've got your work menu now, and you've got this up in the sidebar on the right. And so you're sitting down. It's August 13th, and you're planning out your day. Continue to kind of walk us through this process.
Yeah. So you have there let me copy this. So I'm copying the block references to the to-dos. So for instance, okay, I start my day. So it's usually like this, and I copy the original block reference. You can all see here, and I do a Pomodoro. That's basically it. And I start doing the Pomodoro, and I start working. So I just found out, like, just by trial and error, that Pomodoros work for me. And that's basically the rest of the day. Once I complete this and move on to the next one. And sometimes, it's like my definition of freedom now is the ability to say yes to inspiration. So I'm giving my future selves the permission. It's like, hey, drop everything if there's something interesting, some inspiration that comes up. So at some moment in the day, if there's something that like just inspires me, so I'll do that. So I'm not limited by this list. So, but most of the time it's like this. I just follow my, the to do for the day.
Yep. I love that saying. So freedom is being able to say yes to inspiration. Love that. I think that's great. So this is a great sort of overview of the work breakdown structure and how you're using that to kind of guide your sort of feed into your task management. You're using an interstitial journal there, which I know is very popular in the Rome community. It's something that I've dabbled with a little bit, and I think in certain instances for me it works really well as well. Excuse me, as well. I'd love to shift gears a little bit and talk just broadly about the concept of Rome as a project manager. So project management work is inherently collaborative. You're always working with teams and lots of different people. And I thought you had some good perspectives in the book about what do you do if you're a project manager and you're interested in using Rome. Share some of your philosophies around where Rome doesn't really work well and what it does work well for, and what is your sort of framework around high level and kind of picking, okay, here's where I'm going to use Rome and here's where I'm going to stick to maybe more quote unquote traditional project management tools.
Yeah, I think I guess the traditional way of thinking, or the more common way of thinking about project management, is that you're distributing tasks to your teammates. You're organizing those tasks for your teammates, but that's actually a very small part of project management. In fact, I have a diagram here. Just let's see. Let's just go to the chapter. So in this diagram, so I basically map out the different tasks that the project manager does. And let's see, where is that? Here. And a very small part of that is actually the communications part. Yeah. So communicating with your team, because you have the work of thinking about strategizing, planning about the project, and you have the work of coordinating the work to get the project done. So the thinking part of project management, I mean, what's the best tool for the thinking part? I mean, it has to be a tool for thought, right? So that is where I found Rome to be the best tool for in project management. In the work, in the different all this work in project management, Rome is best for the thinking part. When you're creating, for instance, a work breakdown structure, I mean, Rome is a pretty good tool for that. But when you are now coordinating the work, so if your teammates don't use Rome, so it's like you need to put more work to train them in using Rome. No? So the way I do it is like whatever is the existing channels for communication, whatever the existing habits of communicating for my team, I'll just use that, so that like just the least amount of work to get communications done. And there's this like old saying in project management that the 90% of a project manager's work is communication. And it's because like for things to get done, you have to coordinate the work of your team. You have to tell them what needs to be done, and also at a higher level, you need to help people see the purpose of the project. So you do that through communication tools. Like right now it's going to be like Zoom, and also it's going to be like whatever your team is using, Slack or even email. So you use whatever is existing, and you over communicate. That's how I've been doing it, and it seems to be the best way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Again, as a fellow project manager, I've found that, and I think you had a saying in the book, something along the lines of like changing habits is sort of costly or very difficult, right? And so kind of meeting people where they are, and using traditional tools like spreadsheets and word processors and email and Slack when it's appropriate, and not trying to sort of make Rome into the Swiss Army knife that can do everything a project manager needs to do, right? Like don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. And I think Rome is such a cool tool because it is so flexible. And I love all of the different use cases that people are coming up with out there in the community. But I know for me, I'm aligned with you. Like Rome for me is an incredibly effective tool for thought. It's where I flesh things out. It's where I do a daily journal. It's where I just get clear on my own thinking. But I don't use it in very many collaborative ways at all. Really, when it's time for me to go out and interface with teammates or other, people outside of our organization, I'm pretty much always using traditional tools, and again, sort of meeting people where they are. So I thought that was a really valuable perspective. Talk a little bit about there was another concept kind of going back to the idea of productivity, and when you were talking about the role of a project manager, and a lot of it being communication. One of the things I thought of is really sort of communicating effectively with your team about what are the most important things to be working on right now. What's the sort of critical path that we need to be focused on? And in your book, you talk a little bit about the concept of shot selection, and talk a little bit about the metaphor that you use in there of a fighter, of a boxer, and how you think about shot selection as a project manager.
Yeah, I did some boxing in the past. I mean, like this is a sport, and there's this concept that before you actually use your power, and your strength as a boxer, you have to actually hit the opponent, and that's where shot selection comes in. You have to select your shots, and project management is also a lot about that, because you have limited time, you have limited resources, you have limited teammates. So you have to choose which are the most important parts of the project that you have to work on. And it's also different across the timeline of the project. So you are orchestrating not only the work, but the focus of your team. So in week one, the project manager has to know which are the most important tasks to focus on for that week. And you tell the story. You are the chief storyteller of the project. So when you tell the story of that week one, you are telling, so this is going to be our journey this week. These are the most important things. So you want to make them forget all the other things so that they could focus on the most important things. It's also telling the story to yourself, because I mean you have, the reason why you use Roam is we have limited focus, we have limited working memory, we have limited long-term memory. So you're telling the story to yourself as well, that this are the most important things this week. So this is my focus. So that is that is shot selection in project management. We have limited resources, we have limited time, we have to choose. And again, that's a thinking process. The choosing is a thinking process, looking at all the big picture project and selecting the most important parts and communicating that story, that this is what we need to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the story and being the chief storyteller of your project, you've got a great chapter in the book about the project charter. Maybe give us a little bit of a walkthrough of that and talk about the role that you see the project charter playing in your work, and how does Roam fit into that equation?
So the project charter really is like it's like a script for your what you call this, for your story. So a lot of times the unfortunate thing about project management sometimes is that we sometimes just follow these requirements. So the project charter is almost all organizations a requirement for a project to get started, because you need it to convince the funders or the people who approve the budget, and for people to allot teammates in your project. But the project charter is really a tool for the project manager to plan out what this project will be, and to align that to your teammates. So what are we actually working on? That's actually something, that's a job you're doing in the entire project. You are constantly pitching the project, its importance, its vision, and how we're going to get there. So that's a script that you need to master as a project manager. And the project charter is your first draft of that script. So it tells you, okay, what is this thing we're working on? And then it tells you as well, how are we going to get there? So there are, what this project is, and also the why. The why is, why are we doing this project? So again, you're pitching this project throughout the project, to all your stakeholders, because your job is also to make sure that your project is appreciated. Because if you're working in a corporation, your progress or your teammates' progress depend on the importance of the work. That importance is not, it has to be created by showing people the impact of that work. So this is your guide. This is your tool for doing that. And this is also your tool for aligning your team. So this is what we're doing. So when you create the project charter, that is an opportunity to bring together, your team towards this goal, because you're created together.
Yeah, absolutely. So one other concept that we haven't touched on is the risk breakdown structure. So talk about your sort of perspectives as a project manager about risk in the role of a project, and how do you assess that and communicate that out to the rest of the organization?
Yeah, I think well, the work breakdown structure is actually quite popular among project managers. It's one of the first things that you're taught if you formally study project management. And when I was doing this training to the believers of the book, our book, that was they knew about it, but the risk breakdown structure is a less known, but I think equally important tool in project management because the minimum requirement for success in a project is not to fail, just avoid failure. This is the floor in project success. And for you to avoid failure, you have to foresee what could go wrong in this project. And it turns out there is a systematic process for doing that, and that is the risk-based structure. So it is, I mean, it sounds like the work breakdown structure, and it looks like the work breakdown structure. And instead of work, you will see there risks instead. Yeah. So now, for instance, yeah, this one is a risk breakdown structure of a project I've been doing several times. I just did this once, and I've reused this risk breakdown structure for several summers. I was used to organize this outreach for young students, and I use my project management tools for that as well. This is a personal project, but yeah. So you just want to avoid failure, and similar to the work business structure, you also build this by you're using the knowledge of expertise, using expertise that you may not have through interviews, through note taking from journals. So, like for instance, the genomics project, when I would read journal articles about implementation of genomics in a lab, so it's not. I would tag things there which went wrong, and that's like a risk. So now when I'm gonna build my risk breakdown structure, so I just click on that, or I filter those risks for those specific topics of those journal articles, and I start building my RBS.
Cool. I love it. Sorry, did you have more on that?
Well, the next step is actually the risk register. I think it's also important
Yeah, touch on that.
yeah, because the RBS is simply a list of things that could go wrong. So how do you make use of that? So again, it's shot selection. Which risks do you focus on? So the way to do that is to score your risks. So the traditional way of doing this, or the commonly used way of doing this, is to score it based on probability and based on impact. So, for instance, let me see. We have an example here. Now, for instance, this one. So in this example, like for instance here, the probability here is like let's see if here probability is 1 and the impact is 3, meaning this one in the way I use probability and impact, 1 is like low impact, low probability. 3 is high impact, high probability. And the score is just a product of the impact and the probability. So with that, you could program your attention. So you want to pay more attention to higher scoring risks and less attention to lower scoring risks. Some of the lower scoring risks, you even don't pay attention. Attention is costly. So, and how do you do that? So in Rome, so now that you have your lists of high scoring risk, and you could do queries to do that. I show it in our book. So you could just tag it with dates which are more frequent if they are higher scoring. So maybe, for instance, if the highest scoring risks, the showstoppers, you could review them with your team maybe once a week, and the lower scoring risks maybe once a month. So that's how you program your attention in terms of risk management here in Rome.
Love that. Yeah. And I thought the distinction between probability and impact was really interesting. And what a great way to frame risk. You have some things that might be very unlikely to happen, but if they do, it could blow the whole project up. Right. And then you have some things that might be very likely to happen, but even if they do, it's a very, very low impact. So I love the idea of breaking out probability and impact. And I can sort of easily visualize those as a 2x2 matrix. And you can sort of start to categorize those, and the simple use of tags there would be an interesting way to kind of use those in Rome. And again, you talk more about that in the Rome book. So speaking of the Rome book, as we're kind of running up against our time here, I'd love to zoom out and have you share with us just a little bit of your experience overall. Maybe just talk about the Rome book as a whole, tell listeners how it's sort of structured and what your goal with it is, and share a little bit about the process of putting that together as a first-time author.
Yeah. I was thinking about this project management and looking at the past. I mean, I remember, I think it was 17 or 18 when, I was like, I didn't know what to do with my life. So I talked to my uncle. It's like, and he asked me like, what do you want to do? It's like maybe I'd like to be a writer or something. Like that was one of the things I told him. And so I'm very thankful that through this community, I finally got to make it happen, to actually be a writer, to actually have written a book. And it was really a matter of like building from atomic blocks using Twitter. That's basically it. The book was created through Twitter. So I would create threads of like, before there were even chapters, they would start it as threads, and I would see the reactions of people. I would see their questions. I would see which ones had the likes and the retweets, and that was great feedback to see like which ones here are actually working. So that's why my Zettelkasten is actually in Twitter, and I use scrapbox.io as like the like the summary or like the list of Twitter threads. So when I wrote this book, a lot of it was really just a matter of bringing those blocks from those Twitter threads into our book. So it starts from Rome. When I create threads, I send it out to see, to see whether they actually work, and the actual explaining to people forces me to write in a language that is probably understandable. It's like, because when I'm talking to myself in Rome, I write in shorthand, because so, but when I'm forced to explain something to, externally, then that's when I start to have to like think like, how would this sound like to other people? So that was the first step. And then this sort of got crystallized, this process got crystallized when I read Rob Fitzpatrick's book, Write Useful Books. Because, we came from the same background of like customer development, lean startup. And this is like, the book was just saying, use customer development to write books. Essentially, you bring it out there, get customer feedback, and iterate from that. So the next step for me was to test out the ideas by teaching it. So that was like the phase where I did some one-on-one or like Zoom calls with the believers of the book. And actually, before that, what triggered this book was actually the Rome games. It was like, that's also another like practice of saying yes to inspiration. that was an opportunity. There was a lot of excitement. It's like, how could I take part here? It's like, that's something to do with project management. So, okay, all right, let's do a book on project management. Let's make this my entry to the Rome games. So with that, because of the excitement, because of the retweets, so I got some pre-orders. So that's when I started giving like training and conversations over Zoom. And then some of the chapters are actually based on notes from the recordings of those calls. So it's just constantly reusing the content created through Twitter threads or through Zoom calls. And this is not the final version of the book. So the next version would be a flat book, So this is going to be challenging because, my native language now is in Rome. Like when I talk about something in Rome, it's like, so I just noticed this because I'm writing I'm sharing one chapter, the chapter on productivity in Rome Brain. I'm working on that right now, the chapter. And then you just notice like, it's like, for instance, I talk about the Stallion rider concept at the beginning of the article. But then the actual explanation is actually at the bottom of the article. It's not a problem when you're writing it in Rome because like you just link to that, it's like if you click this, then you will find it out. But then if it's like a web page, it's like, how do you have to reformat the entire thing actually so that it's linear. So when you introduce a topic, like you build on it. So you couldn't jump around like you do in a Rome book. So even in the book, I embed whole sections of future chapters in earlier chapters because it's like it just makes sense. I don't need to rewrite this again. I just embed the whole thing anyway. They'll know this when they encounter it again in future chapter, and I don't know their pathways. Yeah, so that's interesting things to in the book, and also the language of indentation, because you don't have that in a traditional book. But with that, it's like, okay, this idea is within this idea, and when we reset to another, primary block, unindent everything. So okay, we're resetting. So this is another idea. So there's another language, or there's another what you call this aspect of the
It's
communication
like
that
a
Rome has added.
vehicle or a convention. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
I'm still
go ahead.
still figuring out what all these things mean when I block block reference. So it's like, am I transmitting or is the reader understanding what I'm saying here, that this one is located here or something? So yeah, so I'd love to hear feedback, what people think about the book, because like, is this just an experiment?
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, tell people how they can find the book and how can they connect with you if they want to learn more about your work or just ask you a follow-up question.
Sure, the best way is through Twitter. My handle for the related for things related to Rome, project management, productivity is RomeFu. Rome and then FU. Doesn't sound good when it's spoken out.
When you spell it out like that, no, that's funny.
So that's the best place. And then in my profile, there's a link there to the book. I don't know if you could also put the link in the description in this video. And we could talk about it in Twitter. I'd love to get feedback. And Twitter is a great tool for that.
Yeah, and for sure, for anybody watching this after the fact, all of those links will be included in the description below. Also, want to take a minute as we wrap up here just to point out there are several ways that you can connect with Rome Sessions here. So subscribe.romesessions.com. That'll get you signed up for the email newsletter where you'll receive updates about future sessions as well as show notes and things like that after the fact. So be sure to sign up for that if you haven't already. Also at Rome Sessions on Twitter and Jason at RomeSessions.com if you want to connect directly with me. Those are some great ways to do it. So Kahlil, again, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much for your time. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Jason. And yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody who joined us live. We really appreciate you being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great rest of your day.